The next one in the technical management category is configuration management. I assume you're all doing configuration management of the artifacts that you produce. I won't ask why I'm getting all these smiles. Anyway, the whole idea is you want to be able to control the changes during the development and then during the fielding, and you don't want to lose control over those changes. It's bad enough in a single system situation, but in a product line there's the multiplier effect of having to manage the core asset base and having to manage the products. So you need to have a disciplined approach, and you need to have some policies and procedures in place for how artifacts get named and how they get checked in and checked out, and how you address the whole area of creating branches to explore particular features, for example, and at what point fixes get fed back into the main line, and how far back you're going to support earlier versions. So if you don't already have a disciplined approach to configuration management, you're going to have some fun in product lines, because you have the core asset base under configuration management, you have the products under configuration management, and in fact, as the product line evolves, you have the entire product line under configuration management as you move from one generation to the next, and as older assets are retired and older products are retired and new assets and new products come along.
A branching nightmare if done properly.
Yes, exactly. So again, if you don't have a proper process and strategy in place for configuration management right now, you're going to have a real problem with configuration management in a product line context. And basically, for a product line, it's largely a scaling up of what you are currently doing right now. So if you're not already doing product lines and you are not already doing configuration management, then at least you should think long and hard about the kinds of configuration management tool support that you would need to support the product line. So for example, you're going to have people working on, say, different versions of core assets. And at what point do you bring those branches back into the main line? Or at what point are they just, there is the basic set of core assets. There may be some versions created for exploratory purposes. Some may never end up in the core asset base. But you need to take care of those kinds of details. You may have people operating at multiple different sites. And so how do you ensure not only coordination across the different sites, but whether or not your configuration management system has enough server bandwidth to accommodate that? In fact, one of our current customers is setting up a product line that has a unit in India. So they have people back at home base creating core assets. People in the Indian unit are creating products from the core asset base. The plan is to have some core asset development done in India also. But as part of their overall product line adoption strategy, they are placing a heavy emphasis on tool support across these different units. And one of the issues they ran into was the server bandwidth for the configuration management system. So they are tackling a lot of the infrastructure issues in parallel with the scoping decision and the business case. Build and release management. You have internal customers in the sense that you have people in the core asset group, if it's a separate group, releasing work products to the product development group. And so the product development group needs to be sure that they are getting the correct baseline version of whatever core asset they need from the core asset base. You also need to be able to keep track of changes and requests for changes. In particular, once you have products out in the marketplace and customers are starting to make requests for changes to features or requests for additional features, or but I hope not, reporting bugs, you need to make sure that, first of all, can we trace this bug to a product or a core asset? And also, if we get a request for a change to a feature or a request for a new feature, is that request solely applicable to that product, or is there a case to be made that this should really be promoted into the core asset base because we're seeing the same request from multiple different customers? So in addition to tracking those kinds of requests at a marketing and customer analysis level, you should also have some sort of tool support for that and be able to classify those requests in terms of, this is something that affects a core asset in the core asset base, this is something that affects only the particular product. There is some help for this in the form of standards from IEEE and ANSI. There are a couple of standards, one for configuration management in general, one for configuration management plans. Oddly enough, the one for configuration management in general has a lot more information about configuration management plans than the planning document, I think probably because they historically have arisen independently. And one of them is, and I think it's the configuration management plans one, is actually much newer. There's a much more recent revision than the one for configuration management, which dates from, I think, 1987. But there is some guidance in there. The one that has the sample plan for a product line system is not a software product line system, but it just talks about configuration management in a multi-system context. There's also a relatively new book on software configuration management patterns by a couple of authors. The name of one of them is Steve Berczuk, B-E-R-C-Z-U-K, and I can't remember who the other one is, but since he's the primary author, he's listed in the bibliography. So he has looked at the kinds of things that people do in configuration management with respect to check-in, check-out, branch and merge, and so on, and he's decided, hey, what people are really doing is following through on patterns, because there's a lot of reusable expertise tied up in this whole area of configuration management, and he has codified some of those practices in a book on patterns. There's also a book coming out of a European Union funded effort to look at techniques from knowledge engineering in support of managing variations of products and product derivation in a product line context. It's called, the work is called CON-IPF, Configuration in Integrated Product Families. And I think the primary author on that one is McGregor. There is some guidance for configuration management in our old friend, the CMMI, although it's not product line specific configuration management guidance, but it does have a lot of good sense guidance for things like getting control of configurations, naming artifacts, and so on. So the kinds of discipline and expertise that you would have already as a result of being at a level on the CMMI scale that has configuration management as a KPA will benefit you in a product line effort. And I think, in fact, configuration management is a level 2 KPA, if I'm not mistaken. Some of the risks in this is that you don't have a configuration management process, or you have one, but it's not particularly robust to manage the interrelationship between core asset development and product development. Or you already have a product out the door using a subset of capabilities from your core asset base, and now you start to think about your configuration management needs when the horse has left the barn. You have the potential for clone and own at the core asset level in addition to clone and own at the product level in a product line context. So you need to make sure that you don't have these multiple evolution paths in your core asset base. And at some point you're going to have to rationalize your approach to branching and merging and make decisions about when we're going to freeze a particular baseline in our core asset base or a particular subset of core assets in the core asset base to support a particular product or set of products in our product development efforts. If you have a set of practices in place but you don't enforce them, then one wonders why you even went to the bother of setting up those practices. Tool support. There's quite a range of variation in tool support, from things like CVS all the way up to ClearCase, ClearQuest. The other thing that you may be faced with is in a large organization, when you're pulling different organizational units together as a product line group, you'll have one group that's using CVS and the other group using ClearCase. So you really need to think about, well, how are we going to manage the whole process that includes both core assets and products? The last one here refers to the fact that for large, comprehensive, sophisticated tools, there may be quite a learning path associated with it, and tailoring the capabilities of the tool for your specific needs is a non-trivial task. And these are some of the references. The first one there refers to a report that comes from a British company called Ovum. They do periodic assessments of software engineering technology, and the most recent one that I could find on configuration management dates from 2005. So what they will do is they will come up with criteria by which they will judge whatever tools they are assessing, in this case configuration management. And they will then take a representative sample of tools from the marketplace and see how they rate against those criteria. This is a large, several hundred-page report that costs several thousand British pounds, whatever that translates into dollars these days. So in one sense it's fairly expensive. In another sense, if you had to do this yourselves, when you think of the time and effort it would take to go out and get all these tools that you're looking at and make a decision and come up with criteria by which you will judge these tools, you already have a substantial saving here by having this work done for you. You also have organizations like Forrester and Gartner in the US that do this kinds of thing. So there are some resources out there to help you with evaluations like that before you make a decision on either configuration management or tool support in general for a product line, even though these are not aimed specifically at product lines. So what is the relationship between the configuration management tool and the configuration management process?
Tool to enable the success of the process.
What is more typically the case?
Defines the process.
Process
Yes.
is the tool. Yes.
People buy the tool first, and the purchase decision is quite often made on the basis of, well,
Cost.
on the one hand we have CVS, on the other hand we have ClearCase. Which one wins on the basis of cost? The alternative is there's a corporate edict that from January 1st we are going to use ClearCase across the entire corporation. And so you are all going to use it and you will like it. So you need to really think about what needs have to be served by configuration management tools for a product line over and above what needs are being served now. And does the existing tool set support any of those needs? And if not, how much tweaking and tailoring would we have to do of our existing tool set? And if our existing tool set isn't adequate, then maybe we need to think about getting something better for the product line.
Sunk infrastructure cost.
Yes, yeah. So you should really think about your configuration management needs up front and think about the kind of process that you would need to have in place to support that, and then think about the tools to support the process. But very often, the tool decision is made first, and then the processes and policies that are effectively embedded in the tool become those of the organization. Now, you would hope that the vendors have done their homework and that have at least accommodated a lot of the known patterns of configuration management, but you should do some sort of assessment to see whether or not they actually meet your needs. These are the kinds of issues that you will have to deal with, and you'll have to establish policies in place and have them in place for when you make your tool support decision. And so the idea of a unified approach to configuration management for a product line is to get away from different parts of the organization using different levels of process discipline and different levels of tool support. But somewhere in that product line organization, there has to be somebody who really knows the configuration management process and really knows the capabilities of the tool and is capable of enforcing that at core asset development and product development.